Brilliant. Great. So welcome everyone to our talk about how we have used AI tools to boost our students' AI mastery, and potentially at the end, we'll also discuss some recommendations, and maybe you want to take that with you back into your teaching and learning or assessments. Hopefully it's useful, and we're always happy to reach out afterwards as well to maybe share some more resources if that's of interest to anyone. So I'm Dr. Pauldy Otermans. I'm a senior lecturer in psychology, but focusing on more the education side of things. And my colleague Stephanie is here as well. Do you briefly also want to introduce yourself before we kick off with our research?
Sure. So I'm also a senior lecturer in psychology like Pauldy, and we do a lot of research together on pedagogical kind of matters, mostly with our students.
Excellent. And our talk today, we also within, I don't know if they're here, but we also work with our collaborators for the first part that we're going to talk about today. The research we did is in collaboration with two of our colleagues at Bangor University. So what we've done with the data, which we'll show you in a minute, is what we've implemented at Brunel University. So that's Steph and I, but setting up the research and collecting and analyzing data was a joint collaboration between our two universities. So what was our research then? Our aim was really to explore whether AI technologies can aid learning, teaching and learning, assessments, generally the entire journey, so to speak, that the students go through, and seeing whether we can leverage, I guess, AI to offer more effective and dynamic ways for students to interact with our learning materials. But before we implemented any of that, we thought, let's first see, how are students actually perceiving AI tools? What is their impression of that? How do they think AI is relevant or not for their future careers? And are they actually aware of our policies? Some universities may have already a policy, some may not. I should say that this research started September last year, so September 2023. Both our universities, both Brunel and Bangor, had a policy or guidance in place. So we knew that we had something, and we wanted to know, do our students know about that, and how, I guess, not only how much aware of these policies are they, but are they taking that into account when they're engaging with our teaching and learning materials? So that was sort of the start of our project, to really find out what our students know, do not do, like, do not like, are afraid of when it comes to AI tools, and what can we use from that information then to further enhance and support our own teaching and learning as well as our assessment. So we'll come to those at the end. Now, who did we sample? So as we mentioned, we are in psychology. Our colleague Bev at Bangor University is also in psychology. So predominantly we had psychology students taking part in our UK-wide survey. So in total, we had 453 students, which is a really good sample size to do our analysis on. And here on this slide, you see a bit of a breakdown. So 2/3 came from Bangor, 1/3 from Brunel. In terms of overall, the majority, 93.8%, was from psychology, and a smaller minority was from sports science. That is because we both offer, at both of the universities, we offer, like, let's say, a sports psychology component, and those students would often classify themselves as within the sports sciences. And we mainly had year 1 and 2, roughly almost 50% each. And that's also, we know why that's the case, because in psychology in year 1, which is the case in most UK universities, both in year 1 and 2, actually, students need to take part in X number of studies, can be experiments, surveys, interviews, to see what it's like to do research from a participant point of view, and they need to collect points or credits, as we say. So often we get a lot of year 1 and 2 students taking part. So that's our sample. The first thing we looked at in our survey was how students perceive and use AI tools. So the first question we simply asked, have you heard of AI tools? Very easy question. We didn't specify, by the way, what we mean by AI tools. We left it really broad. And later on, you'll see we dive a little bit deeper into this. So the majority, almost like 95%, had heard of them, which gave us already a bit of a positive sign. So we delved slightly deeper into this. Although 95% said they heard about AI tools, only 60% or almost 61% had used them. So quite a majority, or 1/3 of the students had heard of them, but didn't use them, which we thought was quite interesting. And later on, you'll see a few of the reasons maybe why that's the case. So now I'm handing over to Steph to talk about the AI tools they've heard of and some further data.
So bearing in mind when we were asking our students this back in September last year, ChatGPT was all over the media. So when we asked them to list the AI tools that they had heard of, ChatGPT overwhelmingly came through as one of those that they had heard of. But we saw also that a lot of our students were aware that things like Snapchat and Instagram, they're using algorithms that run on the use of generative AI. They were aware of things like Alexa and Siri as well. And then some of our students also noted things like Grammarly and Quillbot and those sorts of things. So there was a variety of different tools that our students understood, classified as AI tools. And if you go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So what we then asked was, how are you using AI tools? And what we've done is we've classified these into different kinds of groupings of uses, if you like. So this first set on this slide are what we classified as potentially unethical uses. So there's been a lot of talk about what classifies as ethical, what is academic integrity when it comes to the use of AI tools. And so these are things that we thought might be problematic, erring on the side of academic misconduct. So, for example, to write an entire essay or report is something we would not necessarily be wanting our students to do. But reassuringly, what you can see is that barely any of our students, at least admitted to having used AI tools to do this. Now, this was right at the start of the academic year, so maybe it was just that they hadn't really had the chance to. But we did note with a lot of these unethical uses, our students were not really using them very much in this way. So they weren't using them to interpret or analyze data or things like that. And even the use here where we see the largest proportion of yes responses to paraphrase text, it's still below half of the students saying that this was how they were using them. So what we then looked at were what we thought were excellent uses. So these are things where actually use of an AI tool is going to take out some of the time burden, if you like, of tasks, but produce a really useful output. So these are things that students were talking about, like creating flashcards or questions to help them in their revision, or creating to-do lists and that sort of thing. Actually creating a to-do list can take quite a lot of time, not particularly useful, other than the output you get out of it. So if these are things that are helping the student to improve their use of time, we know our students are very time poor these days. A lot of them are trying to work quite a lot and that sort of thing alongside their studies. So actually, these sorts of uses are really positive and productive. And what we can see is that a larger proportion of our students noted that these were the sorts of things that they were doing, and also doing things like running spelling and grammar checks and asking questions as well. We thought that this was a really nice use, and about half of our students did say that they were using AI tools to clarify their understanding of lecture content. And the third set of uses were those that we classified as not really unethical. And these are sorts of things that we thought it's okay if students are using these from time to time, but if they were exclusively using AI tools to do these things, then we might be a little bit concerned that they're not developing some of the skills that they need. So our students don't really generate code very much, which is why you can see that very few students noted using it for that. But doing things like generating new concepts or ideas or structures of essays, this might be really useful if it's a topic, say, where a student is quite stuck and they're having a real difficulty getting past that initial idea stage. But we would like to see sometimes students doing this without the use of an AI tool. And what you can see is that the largest use here was summarizing information on a topic. And we know that our students often struggle with, particularly, we're asking our students to use scientific writing. It needs to be very concise. And this is quite really difficult. I think now I hand back over to you, Pauldy.
Yes, thank you. So we asked many more questions in the survey, but for the sake of today's talk, we really want to show what we did with all this data, and we're happy to talk to you outside of this session as well to show you maybe our questionnaire or all the other questions we asked. We also asked a few questions about the AI policy, and a lot of students not a lot of students had really heard of the policy, and the data was collected in the entire of semester one, so from September 2023 sort of till just after Christmas, so January 2024. A lot of them had indicated they well, they may have heard of it, but when we then further dive deeper and said, did you know what it is about? A lot of them said they didn't understand the policy and the guidance that the university had prepared. That was something we also took into consideration. So when we look just at this data, we saw there's a real mixed bag of responses in terms of how familiar students are with AI tools, what they think consists of an AI tool, what they believe AI tools could or should or could not or shouldn't be used for. So we thought there's quite some work that we can do based on this. But we also saw that the students want to know AI tools more, because there was also a section in the survey when we talked about how much do you think, or how confident are you going to use them for the future? How much do you think they're relevant for your future careers? And they were all very positive responses. So based on this, we actually also conducted some focus groups. But again, this is out of the scope of today's session, where we delved a bit deeper in some of these, answers to find out more about how students want us as academics or as people that are delivering workshops to take all of this information into account, and how can we support them better in terms of understanding how AI tools could be used in their experience. So when we look at the implications then for teaching and learning, generally we think it would be really good, and we know some people already doing that, to include dedicated teaching sessions to facilitate not only development of these skills, but also making students aware of what AI is from a very, let's say, generic level. Don't have to go too much into the technicalities of this, because for a lot of subjects that would not be relevant, but giving them a sort of a foundation about what AI is, where did it come from, understanding that this is not something new, it was there for a long time, but just with the rise of generative AI and ChatGPT, these tools become much more available. And then how students can develop their own AI skills. Now, we were only able this academic year, so 23-24, to run one dedicated session in each level in our psychology undergraduate program at Brunel. Because the timetable was already set in stone by the time we had analyzed the data, and we couldn't wiggle much. So next year, we definitely have implemented many more sessions where we go through this in a bit more of a systematic way, and also scaffolding and then between year 1, 2, and 3. This year, it was more of a generic talk, where we showed students what AI was, how could they use AI tools, the biases, how the data has been used, that they need to be careful putting something in an AI tool, and what they should do with the output. So these sessions are not just lectures, they're very interactive, where we actually play, so to speak, with some AI tools. Often one of us would create a free account on one of the tools, and then we showcase to them. These sessions were quite well received by students. As we said, it was only sort of 1 or 1.5 where we were able to squeeze a little bit more in another topic. But students generally quite appreciated it and liked it, and felt a bit more, this is only anecdotal data, but felt a bit more comfortable or confident in, trying to give it a go themselves. A lot of them said they were quite fearful that if they would use it, they would be accused of plagiarism or academic misconduct. So this gave them a bit more confidence in actually understanding what they should not do. Secondly, we also have developed online resources for students. So not only in teaching sessions, but also online resources that they can use to review sort of the AI practices whilst they are studying, particularly leading up to sort of the exam period in sort of Christmas, summer, or May, and then actually in the summer when they have resits. So we've sort of split them in, sort of 4 topics. Writing, because we know what we saw from our data, a lot of students use some tools to maybe get ideas or structure an essay. Luckily, not many use it to completely write their essays or reports. So we've given some guidance more about how one can do that and how you can use the prompts in AI to sort of get what you want out of it. And also how to critique that then, and what is useful for your own essay, report, or whatever it is that you're writing. Our students also need to analyze data, which I think is the case for many programs. So how can they use generative AI to help them in their data analysis? When we talk about statistics to our students, a lot of them say, oh, no, I hate statistics. It's scary. I don't want to do this. I think that's the case for a lot of students. I don't think it's necessarily psychology specific. So again, we've used some we've created some online resources to help them. And we're working with the module leads of the research meta statistics modules, data analysis, to see how they can embed that within their own modules next year, so that students get a more of a feeling for it. And there is actually some support there as well. Our students, like many other students, need to do a final year project or dissertation. So how can they use generative AI in that? And of course, not just the dissertations where they do research, but that's the biggest piece of work. So we're trying to implement this already. The online resources are there, but again, we want to use it much more in teaching sessions next year. just guide them to the resources, maybe do one example together so that they can see, because for many of the assessments they need to do, whether it's an authentic assessment or whether it's more of a traditional assessment, they still need to do some, background research themselves in their own time before they can actually produce the assessment, whatever that may be. And the final thing is about images and videos. That's coming much, much more and more in AI tools nowadays. So we also have produced some resources about that. But of course, all these resources we have to keep updating. I hope not on a monthly basis, but definitely on a term or semester basis, because as you all know, the field of generative AI is changing quite quickly. So we need to keep up to date with that as well. So our teaching sessions are actually not really set in stone, I must say. We have, we have like a template, so to speak, where we have, and then we just keep putting stuff in it. And we're working with a lot of our colleagues. And because we are the education academics, we also support our colleagues in psychology with their teaching practices. So this summer, we're having many more conversations before the next semester starts, sort of end of September, what other module leaders can do within their own modules. So we would provide in our, let's say, more academic skills and employability modules. These are some modules we have in the program. We provide more the, let's say, the foundational things, the more general things, but then we want our colleagues to refer back to those sessions and in their own sessions, link the use of that generative AI, maybe do the assessment the students are doing, or maybe examples within their fields, within their subject, like the brain or the social psychology or developmental psychology, so that students really can then see how they can use the AI tool for that particular module and assessment. So that's something that's also on the way, but our colleagues can already use these online resources. So handing back to Steph to talk a bit about how we have embedded and what we're doing in terms of AI and assessments.
Thank you. So we thought that it was really important in helping to guide our students in the use of AI tools to actually get them using them for some assessment so that they could see what they're allowed to do, how to use them, and that it's okay to use AI tools for certain things. So what we did is a level 4 assessment that Pauldy and I actually run. We decided to embed the use of AI tools with other skills that we were assessing the students on. So what we asked them to do was to generate a ChatGPT output based on a particular prompt. And they had to then copy and paste the output, and they had to really interrogate that output. So we asked them to critique what that output was. Are there things that are wrong that need changing or that you could improve? And show us this by using the tracked changes and comments functions in Microsoft Word, because this was for the academic skill module that Pauldy referred to. And so these are some of the skills that we're asking the students to learn. What we actually found slightly surprised us in that it was those digital skills that they've really struggled with. The students who didn't do particularly well on this assessment, mostly it was because they really struggled with using track changes and comment. They would write a little paragraph afterwards, for example. What we found that was a really positive and pleasing surprise is that students were demonstrating a really good use of critical thinking. This is level 4 students, so these are in their first year on our degree program. And often we do not see very much in terms of critical thinking, and we really work hard to try and build up this skill in our students. So this was really encouraging to see that this assessment was really enhancing critical thinking skills. And we also found that there was a really good discrimination of students' abilities with this assessment. And what we then found on the next slide, thank you, was we also embedded use of ChatGPT in a level 5 assessment. And of course, we always said, other tools are available. You can use whichever ones you want. So in this particular assessment, it used to be a very traditional assessment. And we sort of flipped it on its head a little bit, where the module lead actually generated a little output using a particular prompt and asked students then to give their own response to the prompt and bear in mind the output that she had given them from the AI tool. And they needed to critically analyze that output as part of their essay. And they needed to bring in, things like scholarly resources and build an argument based on evidence and all of the sorts of things that we usually ask them to do. And the feedback from this module lead actually really consistent with what we found with the level 4 assessment was that students were showing a lot more critical thinking than they had done in previous years. And again, the grade distributions looked really similar to previous years. It wasn't that they all really struggled and failed or all did astronomically well. And again, it discriminated really well between students' ability. So what we did was we also actually evaluated all of our assessments across the program. And we did this, at the beginning of the year to see, are we in trouble here with our assessment? And we used a traffic light approach. So we rated the assessments green if they were generative AI resistant. And this was generally things like on-campus invigilated exams. So students are sat there in an exam hall with our students do their exams online with a lockdown browser, so they can't access the internet or anything like that. Those were fine. Amber assessments were those that were partly generative AI resistant. So students might be able to use AI tools to do part of the assessment, but would have to do other things themselves. So these for this year, we thought that's fine. They can continue the way they are, and we will reevaluate them at the end of the academic year, aka now. And then we had red rated assessments were ones that we used ChatGPT for this. So if we put an assessment in ChatGPT and it could give a really good answer that would give a student a really good grade, this was a help this assessment needs changing kind of situation. And these are the ones that we really worked on actually changing for the academic year that we've just finished. So I think I hand back to you now, Pauldy.
Yes, thank you. Just one thing I wanted to add to this as well. In the green section, we also had quite a few assessments where the students have to do an oral presentation or there is an oral component to it. So these were also obviously quite generative AI resistant. Students could still use those AI tools to help them prep for that presentation thing that they needed to do in person. But of course, because they were in person and they often couldn't use any other tools with them, they just maybe had some slides behind them, or they just had to turn up. They, of course, had to, present there in person. So that was quite good. I also wanted to add to what Steph said is that a lot of colleagues actually appreciated this. I mean, it was a lot of work from our side. And yes, we have a few days planned this summer to do the same thing again with a traffic light and also look at our postgraduate degrees. We haven't had a chance, honestly, just because of time to review those assessments. But when we used our traffic lights and we talked to each individual module lead of those particular assessments, they really appreciated sort of how we had approached this assessment, the support we give them. Often we already had some alternative suggestions available, but we worked with them. And I mean, they are still the person responsible for the assessment. It was not that we were telling them what to do, but it was a very much collaborative way of tackling our assessments. And one thing where we have a few colleagues that may be a bit resistant and changing, whether it is because of AI, whether we want it to be more authentic, or whether this assessment is just, too old now, it has been used too many times. Actually, even with those academics, when we talked about, your assessment is not very AI resistant, you may get a lot of academic misconduct cases. That was also one of the ways we could get them to talk to us, because no one likes to go through these procedures, whether it is for the student or for yourself as a staff member. It takes up a lot of time. So hopefully we're going to go through this whole cycle again this year, particularly focusing on those ambers and looking at the postgraduate programs, because we haven't just touched them yet. So what are then some other things that we're doing? As I was saying before, we need more sessions. So we are, battling with timetabling and with our colleagues to see if we can get some more sessions in. We already have confirmed at least 2 in semester 1 for level 4. Really want when our students come into the program to make sure that this, is as important as it is as how to reference, how to find literature, how to write an essay, or how to prepare for this. We really want to ensure that AI is sort of at the top of that. So we have one planned more at the earlier weeks of the semester, and then one more closer to the end when the assessment period really starts picking up or is very close by the Christmas break. So to reinforce that, and they are quite interactive, practical sessions. As we mentioned, we are already in discussions with other module leads, but probably this will continue a bit more closer to when the real new academic year starts, as everybody is in marking mode, boards of examiners, graduation, resits. People are not yet thinking about what am I teaching next year. And some people don't even know yet what they're teaching next year. So when that's all set in stone and we're getting a bit closer to September, we also want to discuss it with them. And hopefully our away day is not planned yet, but hopefully we can also deliver some more training. We do this on a yearly basis for our staff to see, so that they have a better understanding of what it is that we're teaching the students, so that they can really build upon what it is that we do, and there is no duplication of efforts there. And Steph will tell you a bit what we're doing with the assessments.
Thank you. So the first assessment for level 4, the one that I just previously discussed, having now run that one, we want to review the prompts that we ask the students to use. And also, instead of asking them to copy and paste their output, we're going to ask them to copy the public link to the chat. That's kind of stronger evidence for them that they have followed the process that we've asked them to follow. And also, it's teaching them another aspect of what you can do with AI tools as well. We have another assessment at level 4, the one that Pauldy actually just referred to, which is a mock job interview where students have to come and pitch themselves. As part of that, we ask them to submit their CV so that we can use their CV to ask them tailored questions as an interview panel might. So this coming academic year, we're going to ask them to use AI tools to generate their CV. And then, of course, they can tweak that however they think it needs to be tweaked, but use it as a starting point, and also get them to use AI tools to write a cover letter as well, as if they were applying for the job that they're going to come and have their oral presentation interview about. We've also, last year, we did sort of let them know that they could use AI tools to help them prep for their pitch if they like, and we're going to be a bit more explicit this year about what they can and shouldn't do for that also. At level 5, our students create and submit a poster, and they actually come and give a presentation, a bit like a conference poster presentation session. The presentation was added this year partly to help make this assessment a bit more resistant to AI. And what we're going to ask them to do this coming academic year is to actually use an AI tool to create that poster that they submit, and then as part of their presentation about the poster, reflect on that. And we're also going to ask them to include a little reflection section on their poster as well, just so we don't have in the group where they're presenting, the first student says, oh, I found this, and then all of the rest of them just say, oh yeah, I found that too. Get them thinking about how they found the process of using an AI tool to create a poster, so that they are reflecting on that as well. And actually, reflective element, something that we have found that at the moment AI tools aren't that great at doing either. So this is another element of bringing in a bit of resistance where students are going to be using their own thoughts and their own ideas. For another assessment at level 5, we're going to ask the students to use AI tools for work on a research paper, and the sorts of things that actually it might be useful and helpful for them to understand how to use AI tools. So they could use it to find papers in the literature and summarize them for them, for example, because we know this is something a lot of students really struggle with time-wise. They say, it takes me so much time to search for relevant papers and weed out the ones that aren't relevant that sometimes I just end up picking a couple that look fine. And this could actually help them to target their research a little bit more effectively and then really interrogate those papers once they've got the appropriate ones. And then for another assessment at level 5, again, this is actually one that Pauldy and I run, is a qualitative research method. And we are going to teach them how to use generative AI tools for data analysis of qualitative research, in particular things like transcription. Because those of us who have ever tried to transcribe verbatim by hand know that it's very time consuming and that your time could be spent in much better ways. So those are some things that we're going to be using in the coming academic year. And I think that is it. So thank you very much, everyone. And I know that there are some questions that are there in the chat. So we'll try and answer those.
Thanks, Pauldy and Stephanie. That was great. Probably we could go on for quite a while with questions. I was thinking about half a dozen myself as you were talking, so that was really great. I've been keeping half an eye on the chat here, so I'll paraphrase a couple here. But in a minute, I'll hand over the mic if anyone wants to shout out and just put their question verbally. First of all, I've got a YG with a funky tropical background there. Please.
Thank you very much. Very, very inspiring lecture.
I just want to ask, so in your university, AI is integrated into the assessment. So the students have to write essays in the final coursework. Does it matter if they use AI to write it? In the place where I work, we don't encourage students to use AI to write it. And we even, in some cases, we even accuse them of academic misconduct. So I don't know where to draw the line. So how do you deal with that? It seems that you encourage, and even in the final essay, is it still a good thing? Or it is, how do you deal with this? Another thing is that, do you ever use like Turnitin to detect AI, or you think that is no need or no good? Yeah.
Well, the Turnitin question is probably the quickest part to answer. So we are not using the AI detection in Turnitin. And actually, we've been sort of instructed that because we can't prove, for want of a better word, whether or not a student has used Gen AI in an assessment, then we're not actually allowed to refer for academic misconduct due to suspected use of AI. What we have found anecdotally is that assessments where a module lead will say this is definitely AI actually tends to not do particularly well, because they notice it because of very strange use of language or content that's not really relevant to the question. So that's sort of how we've been dealing with the academic misconduct side of things at the moment. When it comes to use of AI in final essays or assessments, it's a little bit down to the individual module lead. So there's one assessment in particular that I can think of that is a final year essay. And the module lead has said to students, this is what you can use AI for, and this is what you shouldn't use AI for, because actually it's not going to help you in your final essay. And, you know, she's asked them to bring in particular readings that she has set them for the module. And it's a module content that there is a lot of stuff out there on the internet. And if you ask for AI use, she said it always ends up going down a complete incorrect rabbit hole and brings you to content that's actually not relevant to what she's been teaching them in the module. Other module leaders have been a bit more, please don't use it to write this essay. And that's sort of where we are at the moment. And Pauldy, you can add to that. And I mean, nothing really to add, I guess. Indeed, as you said, it's now up to each module lead to determine how or how not they're using AI tools. Generally, the university is quite keen to support students in developing their AI literacy and AI skills. So hence, having it in a few assessments, not saying all, is helpful for the students to actually put that learning into practice. The same as that we try to give our assessments a practical component, because we know that when they go out into the field of work, they're not going to sit and only write, lab reports every day. They also do other things. So hence we've tried to do that. But it is very academic specific. I would agree with that, yeah.
So you mean, may I interpret it? You mean in certain aspects, we encourage students to use AI, like generate ideas, this kind of things. But in the finalized report writing or whatever, it's down to the individual tutor to decide whether it is acceptable. Thank you very much. I want to follow up with one. Sorry. So, how can you elaborate a little bit more about using AI to enhance the critical thinking? That's it.
Yeah. So what we saw in our year one assessment, students have to write a reflective piece on the development of their transferable skills and employability skills that they have picked up through the whole year, because in semester 1 and 2, we have modules on skills development and employability. And now that is a very reflective piece, and one could say, oh, generative AI can just write that for you. So we have already put some parameters in there. But this year, because we explicitly told them, okay, you write that reflection, you still do that. You use a few examples that we can clearly see that you have, that is not just asked by an AI tool to write that for you, but now you're also going to ask AI to do that. And you are going to tell us in your assessment, you're going to critique that and showcase, where this may be wrong, maybe where it hallucinated or what is not correct. you're basically going to give, let's say, feedback to the AI's response, but you do that in your assessment. And using that approach, we actually saw that students, compared to last year, we obviously didn't have that element, but last year we just had a general reflective piece where the students actually were very descriptive. They were not very critical in terms of reflecting on their own skills. Now, when we have embedded that generative AI element in there, we see that students actually have developed much more critical thinking skills in the way they have picked up on, what is correct, what is not correct. And also that has translated in the way they have written their own written reflections. They are much more reflective and critical about themselves and less descriptive. So indirectly, it has helped us as well with a different component. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Right. There's a bunch of questions here that are discussion topics in their own right. I'll try and get through lots, though, and we'll keep them reasonably short. Richard messaged me directly with this one. He was just asking if you know of any research that compares the findings with other disciplinary groups.
I would say no is the answer. I think that for us, I mean, we have used this with our own students in psychology. However, very keen on, working with other colleagues in other subjects and other departments, because we know assessments can be quite subject specific, what we ask our students to do, depending on where our students may go afterwards and the type of jobs they may get into. So yeah, if anybody has an idea of how we could collaborate and see, do comparisons between different subjects, yeah, feel free to reach out to us and let's have those conversations, because I think that's a really valid point.
Yeah, that would be good to know. There was a couple of people asked a similar question, so I'll just lump these together. It was about the referencing system that you used, and I think there was a bit of an exchange on one of the threads on this in the chat, but how do students reference their work? Have you got a particular template that you use?
Yes, we do. So we actually, in the academic skills session that we run, our subject librarian actually comes in to teach our students referencing. And she uses RefWorks with them, I think, doesn't she, Pauldy? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And APA style then, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. So students get taught the exact rules, because APA rules on referencing are very specific, and that is what they are asked to stick to.
Yeah. Okay. So a question from Amy here. After reviewing the assessments, was there much room or time for staff to do anything about them? So if they've got a red traffic light, is there time before everything kicks off to make the necessary revisions?
So I would say yes, with a caveat. So we did the traffic light evaluation over the summer last year. So before the assessment briefs were released to the students, and we held conversations with our colleagues when there was still time to think about these things. Of course, the time to get things through Board of Studies had passed. So we had to stick within the existing module outlines for the assessments. We didn't have time to go through the QA processes to have large changes. But where something says written coursework, there's quite a lot you can do within that. And I know the QA rules inside and out, so we were really careful about that. But now, of course, we have more time this year, to think about any larger changes that we want to make as well, if we do want to actually pose changes that are more substantial to get QA approval and go through all of that process as well. But there are a lot of small tweaks you can do relatively quickly in terms of turnaround time.
And if I may add to that as well, we didn't just meet with our colleagues, in the summer, let's get that assessment brief up and running and create something new. We then also supported them, whether it was semester 1 or 2, in developing, the right or the appropriate teaching materials that then would support the students either in their own module or in our academic skills, employability skills modules, so that to make sure, the students really are able to do that assessment, that they didn't get stuck on the use of AI tools. So that was more of a collaboration between, our modules and their specific module, so that the support sort of ran throughout that entire teaching term. So it was not only let's make a new question.
And I actually have one point that I thought of as you were saying that, as well as teaching session guidance. We also worked with the colleagues that were tweaking their assessment to really help them with their marking criteria guidance as well, because we know with new types of assessments, students can find it really stressful if they don't understand how they're being assessed. So we did things like making rubric matrices that had very specific criteria, and then they could see exactly what they needed to do in order to earn a good grade for an assessment. So it was very clear to the students from the outset.
one question. I'll lump a couple of these together. What particular platforms were you using? Someone's asking specifically here about the platform for the poster presentation. And I saw a comment elsewhere on the thread as well that was asking about whether we feel like sometimes like salespeople for OpenAI or Microsoft. It's not something I thought of, but I suppose it's an interesting perspective. So what are you using and how are you guiding students towards this?
I can start with the poster one because that's the one I'm responsible for. This year, they had to use the Brunel University templates, as you may have in a corporate as well, where the organization has a template. So if they use generative AI tools, we talked a bit about images like DALL-E. I have a list somewhere. I can't find it quickly, but happy to share that outside. Drop me an email. I can share what we send the students in terms of a slide with hyperlinks to particular tools. Gamma is one we also showed students. But as we said, this year, we haven't, I guess, push them to use AI tools when it comes to a poster. Next year, they're going to have, I guess, more leeway and more, they can actually take advantage of that because they don't have to necessarily use the template anymore that we have constrained them with this year. And then we're going to use many more tools. So I need to update that as well because this only takes place in semester 2. So we have a bit of time to look at it. But that's for the poster. For the written stuff, we use ChatGPT in most of our demonstrations to showcase students because that's the one most of them had heard of when we did a raise of hands and asked the students, which tools have you heard of in the classroom? And many of them said ChatGPT, which also came from our survey. So we thought, let's use this one as an example. But we also talked about Gemini. We talked about Perplexity. We talked about, we even talked a little bit about Illicit AI, which I know is not for writing, but for literature. So we always try to give them a list of at least 5 different AI tools that they could use and also those that they shouldn't use so that they have a bit of an idea and try to showcase as much as possible. But I guess the problem for us is we may do this teaching session, let's say in week 6 of the semester. The assessment is not due until, let's say, week 12. And in those 6 weeks, that particular AI company has already changed everything that they did. So when the students then go back to the teaching sessions where we explain those relevant things, some of it may already be outdated, even in a scope of, 6 to 7 weeks. So I guess that is a problem we're facing. We're trying to keep up to date with that, but yeah, it's almost impossible.
So does Brunel have an institutional access to?
No.
Okay.
So we only say to the students that that's why we only show them the free tools of the free version of the tools. And we say that you can use everything that you need for your assessment can be done with the free version of the tool. So we don't encourage any students to get their paid version. We actually discourage them for doing so. So there should be a level playing ground that is the same. But we don't know if a student has bought their own license and then has used that. I don't think that we can't find that out. Yeah.
Was there just a minor question of my own here? Was there any issues around accessibility in the sense that students will have to, if they are using this, even the free version, they're required to enter certain details like email addresses, in some cases phone numbers. Is that seen as sort of a level playing field? I seem to remember some concerns were raised about that when it was discussed here at York.
I think that is something that we have spoken about as well. This year, no student raised concern about it, and actually a lot of them already had put in their details to get the free use of ChatGPT, for example. But it is something that we want to really try and monitor because we don't want to force students to put in their details if they're not comfortable. So we've spoken about things like having a kind of a generic free license that one of us sets up that we share with the student to use if they would prefer to do that so that they don't have to enter their own data.
So some really nice comments here about how it's refreshing to see people, us engaging with AI and actually training students rather than just accusing them of academic misconduct. And good observation here about the word delve. And Pauldy actually heard you use that genuinely when you were talking. So it's not entirely in the domain of, doesn't always mean that it's an AI. Was there any issues with data security, as in, what's happening with the information being stored when you were looking at this?
For us, not yet. I think that's what we asked them to do. We actually, we gave them a few example prompts and we told them they could use their own as well. We made it very clear to the students that they should not use any of that. They should not give the AI any of their personal information. They really should stick to the content of the topic that they are exploring, whatever that may be. However, we may run into that problem in next academic year, where we're going to also look more at data analysis, because we know that there are AI tools out there that students can use, or people can use in general, for analyzing data. And we know that this is an area a lot of our students struggle with when it comes to how to set up your file, how to clean the data, what statistical tests do you need to run. This is an area that a lot of them struggle with throughout their degree, actually. So that's when it may become problematic if they just upload the data they have collected and they haven't anonymized their data sets or something. Then that is definitely something we're looking at and working actually with the relevant module leaders, because these are not modules we teach ourselves, to see how can we all support our students better, because that may also have an implication for the final year project, the dissertation in the final year, where the majority of our students, I think 80-90%, I think, does primary data collection. So they collect data from humans, whether it's a survey, an interview, focus groups, experiment in the lab, online or in the lab. So, and often we do ask, often that data, what you get from participants, is not completely anonymous, because you do, acquire some demographic data. And if you put them all together, you could potentially identify who that was. So that's definitely something we need to teach our students and potentially our colleagues as well further on, so that we don't get into any trouble if we're using, certain tools.
Good question here about secondary schools and colleges. I'm not sure what's happening there. Did you come across any information that suggests what if any AI education is going? How school systems are grappling with this issue?
I know we should both shake our head no, although we had a meeting last week to see could we sort of extend the work we're doing, and particularly looking at those students that are in their final year of secondary school and thinking about going to university. So we know how they may or may not, or what has been done and in schools, and how that then linked to the skills they develop at university. We have done other work about general academic skills with that, but it's going to be interesting, I think, to also look at AI literacy and AI skills. So that's something we haven't done as of yet.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. Well, just take this opportunity then. Thank you very much, Pauldy and Stephanie, for giving up your time today. It's been really great. And I'm sure this is just a discussion that is going to go on. And as you say, I think the interesting point you made was about the materials and the speed at which things, move on in AI. So trying to teach an AI student AI literacy is very hard to build a resource bank that's stable and, has a decent shelf life. So it's definitely going to be a conversation that's going to be ongoing. Right, I'm going to stop the recording there and bid farewell to everyone on YouTube.